Welcome to the Lifeline, a production of Simply BJE. The goal of this podcast is to build, inspire, and to empower our listeners through conversations on business, leadership, and mental health. We invite you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline. Now, let's tune in for today's episode. Top of the day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Lifeline. We're your host, life strategist and entrepreneur, Bo Powell, social media influencer and owner of the for-real brand Lindsberg Pettway, and yours truly, leadership consultant and mental health advocate, Barry J. Elliott. You can visit us at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline and on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and now on YouTube. Once again, we are favored to have some guests with us today. We have recording artist, musician, author of the book Daddy Issues, pastor, senior director of global alumni engagement at the University of Pennsylvania, doctoral student, husband, and father of 5, Timothy Wortham Jr. And certainly last but not least, we have a teacher and educator in the public school system in our nation's capital, blogger, youth advocate, licensed minister, and candidate in the Doctor of Ministry degree from the United Theological Seminary, soon to be Dr. Torren Cooper. Good morning, gentlemen. How's everybody doing today?
Good morning. Good morning.
Fantastic.
Good stuff. Well, we thank you guys for joining us today. So this is a topic I believe that's near and dear to all of our hearts. So talk to us a little bit. Well, let me start here by saying that all of us have been impacted by the lack of a father presence in some type of way, whether that was emotional, whether that was physical or otherwise. But yet, even though our experiences have been different, what is similar is that it all impacted us. You know, it's impacted us in ways that we probably can't fully articulate. So if I'm going to ask each of you, if you would kind of share your story with what I call the daddy hole, which is the absentee father. I was taught some years ago that each of us was born with a hole that only God can fill, right? But I also believe that that thing is applicable to a father, that there's a space in us that only a father can fill. So talk to us a little bit about your experiences. So we're going to do something unique today. I'm going to start with Lindsberg. Tell us a little bit about your story, then Trabor, and then our guest, Tim, and then Mr. Cooper, Reverend Dr. Cooper. Tell us a little bit about your father's story.
Well, my story began with a father who wanted, a son very, very bad. Okay. He had 4 daughters. And he wanted a boy to keep the legacy going on. So before me, there happened to be 3 other boys born. None of them survived. So I was born in 1972. And unfortunately, my father passed in 1974. So I was 2 years old when he left me. And his legacy is something that I hold near and dear to me because I have learned about his legacy through his relatives, his cousins, his nieces, his nephews. Had the opportunity to spend time with his mother before she passed away, my grandmother. So I learned a lot about who he was. And one of the very unique things that my mother's grandmother told me, my mother's mother told me, my grandmother, she said, "You're just like your dad." And just, I didn't know it. I didn't get opportunity to see him or to mimic what he did because I saw it. It was just some things that I had inherited. So my situation was father died when I was 2, growing up in the city of Detroit in the 80s, very challenging time. So my mother made sure that I was able to navigate through the streets by putting me in private school, Catholic school. So I didn't get a chance to get caught up in the streets. But I do have or had a void there based upon the lessons that a father can give his son. So very unique now because I try to give those lessons to my sons, but the lessons that I give is something basically what I didn't get. So am I filling the void that they need? I hope. Or am I just pouring in them what I didn't get? So that's a very unique perspective with Lindsberg.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good.
You know, when I thought about this question, I was hoping you to continue talking a little bit, Lindsberg, see how I can package this up. But I was in my father's or in a household where my father was there up until I was about 3. but it was a very abusive household. So I don't have a lot of memories of my father, and the ones I do are not very good. Um, my first recollection of my dad was, um, and my mom and sisters and them really had to give me some clarity as we got older, was I remember it was one night, I believe it was maybe after church, and I remember it's a lot of ruckus going on in the house. I'm in the bedroom, and the only thing I remember is my dad standing in the hallway, and I can see his silhouette. And I vividly remember there was a pistol in his hand. And so my mom and them had to pull me out the window because we had to sleep in the car that night. And so I was raised the majority of my life um, with just small glimpses of my dad, um, but never really got that core, you know what I mean, if you will, that affirmation, the formation of identity. So, another memory I have of my dad was I remember I was going from, I think it was elementary school to middle school. He wanted to give me a gun so I could protect myself. And I was like, Dad, I don't need that. So I
Oh,
don't need a
wow.
gun. Like,
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? And I was like, but I was still at that kind of stage where you were still hoping. I can just remember the feeling. I was just excited to be around them. And I didn't just realize how detrimental that um, advice or direction was. But I actually was there. Me and my father was in a full-blown conversation when he passed away. Uh, and I don't even remember what the conversation was, but all I can remember that I think that was the first time I really felt good around my dad. It was a really good conversation, and he died during that conversation.
wow.
So, that left a glaring hole in my life that, that even as a young man, I won't say even as a young man, when I got older, I really felt the impact of that because I was like, God, why? Why did you take my dad? I don't know how to do this stuff. I don't know how to be a man. I don't know how to be a father. I've never seen that. So, so this is a very, very good topic today. I know a lot of introspect because I didn't really have a father figure in my life until um, recently, until I got into my 30s or 40s, to where I really got a solid father figure in my life. So that's the short version of my story about my
Wow.
absentee dad.
You told us something we never heard before. That's powerful, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, feel like we need to take a breath and a beat right there. Um, I'll certainly try to encapsulate my story a bit as well because there's a lot to tell, and so I'll just kind of hit the highlights. My some of my earliest remember some of my earliest memories, excuse me, albeit fragmented, are from when I was in daycare. And so that was around 3 or 4 years old. And I know that by that time, my father was already out of the house. So I can't recall the day he left. I can't recall a moment or something happening where he said, I'm leaving. I just remember him not being there. And so I went through all of elementary school, seeing him on occasion. And part of that was because we lived at his parents' house. So we lived with my paternal grandparents for quite a while. And so he couldn't come see his parents without also seeing his kids. And so it was always a question of, well, who is he really here to see? You know what I mean? And so that was a little bit challenging. And I can recall around the fourth grade or so, I found out, he didn't tell us, but I found out that he had relocated to Minnesota and had taken a job working at Flight Time Records with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. He was a songwriter. And I guess his dream was his priority at that moment. And so there was a stretch of time from about fourth grade to 11th grade where I just didn't see him at all. And there was a version of that stretch of time that was a little bit easier than the time that preceded that because I didn't have to wonder. if this might be a day that he stops by. I didn't have to wonder if I might see him this week or next week. I knew I just wasn't going to see him. I may have spoken to him by phone once or twice over that stretch of time. And then when I was in 11th grade, we got word that he was living in Georgia, and our convocation happened to be there that year, and my uncle arranged for us to meet. And so we reconnected, and immediately everything was kind of water under the bridge. You know, my sister and I were just so excited to see him again, to have him in our lives again. And I think part of the reason why we did not harp on the negative experiences over the past decade plus was when we saw him, he was visibly ill. And so I think we just wanted to make the most of whatever this time was going to be. And so we had a great, almost a week together. He asked us if we had any questions, if there was anything that we wanted to say. And I think the two of us just kind of silently agreed that, no, let's not tank this moment, right? And so that was October of 94. September of 95, when I was supposed to be starting my senior year of high school, I was in Georgia burying my father. And so for me, I was blessed, I will say, over the years to have some very strong father figures, one in particular who was my pastor for most of that stretch of time. But most of my father figures did come from the church. And so, but the thing that you can't see when you have those father figures is a father in the home. And so that dynamic was always missing. And so I'll kind of stop there because I don't want to get ahead of myself with some of the conversation to come.
Wow, Major. Dr. Cooper, talk to us, sir.
Yeah, I think I'm with Tim. I think we need to take a break, take a breath or something this morning. I didn't know how anxious I would feel, but I have a particularly interesting story, maybe not one that's unique, but I was in elementary school when I found out that, well, really understood that all of my siblings and I had different fathers who weren't active in our lives. And my story is particularly interesting because out of all of my siblings, I don't know who my biological father is. So that was a lot to navigate. But I didn't really feel the impact of that until maybe high school, college, because we had a stepdad at home who was physically present, but not so much emotionally present. But I didn't blame him for that because to me, he was just there for my mom to, improve her quality of life, you know, and be there for her. But there were some times throughout my childhood where we thought we knew who it was. We eventually, when I became an adult, like, had some DNA tests done that both proved to, not be my biological father. So I've been navigating that as an adult, understanding that the father hole or, the missing father piece that I've been experiencing as a child has continued into adulthood, into many areas of my life. But I've been working through that through, therapy, through conversations, building bonds with other young men, dealing with the same thing, seeking counsel in church and things like that too. So it's been particularly interesting, this ride, and I feel like my story is not over yet. I'm still hopeful, to find out who that is. But I think the missing piece for me, not so much for education or career, because I think I've done pretty well for myself. I'm getting ready to become a doctor, but I think the practical things like understanding who I am as a person, interpersonal relationships, like being a man for my family, even tying the tie, paying bills, how to apologize, those kind of things I missed growing up as a young man without my father.
That's major. I think I'm different because my father was physically there for the early part of my life, but because he was military, he traveled. But the thing that the absentee father for me piece was he was emotionally absent. He didn't know how to be emotionally available for boys. Him and my sister, but for the boys, he didn't really know how to connect. And because I was a church boy, that really was a trouble for him because my father was not a church guy.
Hmm.
If you didn't talk sports or beer, you weren't talking his language. And so outside of that, he didn't know how to connect. So for me, that was the absent piece. So let's take a segue. Bo, talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the impact of my father, and I think that's where we want to take this conversation now, which is how great that impact was of not having a dad around. I know for me, I mentioned it during when I was sharing my story earlier, of just not having someone to help me form my identity of who I was as came into adulthood. I think that was the greatest impact for me, especially coming in as a new believer, what that looked like, because the only influences I had growing up were not positive influences as it relates to manhood. Um, Unlike some of the other our guests, I didn't have anybody even in the church who took interest with that. So I kind of was just, you're in church, and especially when the denomination I was raised in, there was not a whole lot of explanation of how to think through living a life of faith. So actually, I ran from church um, because it was just always about don't do this, don't do that, But I never understood how to manage the urges, even the anger, or how to navigate those type of emotions in a manly way. So that impacted me a great deal um, as a young man. But through counseling and God prayer and a lot of reading with that, because I had a hunger to try to figure that out, and so those have molded me and shaped me into the man I am today, and have had opportunities now, I think, to pour into other young men when God gives me those opportunities, which has kind of helped shape my identity up to this point. So, I'd like to hear from some of our other guests and our host. I guess we'll start with Brother Cooper first. Then we'll go to Dr. Wortham, Lindsberg, and we'll finish with you, Barry.
Yeah, I think for me that missing piece was identity of who I was as a person, but also as a male. When it came to learning how to tie a tie, asking girls out, how to treat and talk to girls in high school. My mom, God bless her, she had three boys and a girl. So she would tell us, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but she would say, like, I'm your mom and your dad too. But I'm like, you're a woman, you can't teach me how to talk to other women. You can teach me how to talk to you, but that's a different perspective,
Yeah.
So I think that even navigating like you're coming of age when you start growing hair in your body and knowing how to cut your hair, all those things I missed out on. And I think that I try to gather a sense of like identity from like my friends. What did they do? Who taught them things? And when I got to college, I met so many other brothers who had the same experience or something different, and they knew so much more about life than I did. And I'm like, how did you know this? Like my dad taught me even like things about cars and everything. I still don't know some things about cars, but so some of those intimate moments that you grow up with, that you kind of see on TV as well too, and then reading books, didn't happen for me. So I had to try to make those things happen for myself. And I think that joining mentoring groups, um, my fraternity later in life, you get to meet other men who are still learning as you are. And I think those kind of plug the holes for me. Many times I'm not embarrassed to say this, I had to Google some stuff like, what do you do when this happens? And my mom, she did an excellent job of preparing me for life, but some things that you just can't teach, some things you have to experience as a man. And I think that as much as I desired to have my dad with me, I knew that it wasn't a possibility. So I tried to um, find people to plug those things in. Hope I'm not speaking too soon, but I read Tim's book, and there's a chapter where he talks about, trying to find surrogate parents, a surrogate father. So, and for me, I was always hopeful that that person would be my fifth grade teacher or somebody at the church, or someone would just see me and just know that I needed a dad and just step in. And more often than not, that did not happen, but I just kept searching and try to find who can help me with my education, who can help me with my finances, who can help me with my personality and growing that way. So you just try to find a way to navigate by just pulling on different resources and filling those holes and those gaps to help you get to each stage in your life.
Yeah, I mean that sounds so familiar. I don't think I've ever articulated it this way, but I feel like a father represents certain things in the home, including security, stability, strength. And in my father's absence, what I really felt was that I navigated life under a shroud of fear.
Mm.
I always felt vulnerable. I always felt uncovered and unequipped. I mentioned once in the book how my father was actually a boxer, but he was not around to show me how to throw my hands. And so there was some very practical, to Torrance points, just so many practical, just deposits that we expect and anticipate from good present fathers that were just lacking. My father missed my fifth grade graduation, my eighth grade graduation. He was deceased before I graduated from high school. He never saw me in a recital. He never saw me. I think the one time he saw me play music was that week when I went to visit him and we stopped by a music store and I played the keyboard in there for him. But yeah, I'm wrestling with this because again, I've not thought about it in these terms, but that's what his absence meant for me was that I did not have the sense of security that his presence would have afforded me.
Mm. Wow. Um, I don't think I ever thought about this particular question, but I think I know the answer. I think the greatest impact that his absence had on me was to live up to his legacy, was to make his name great, was to keep his name alive because I'm named after my father. And that's all I had was his name. That's it. Pictures were scarce. Couple of pictures. It was one picture that a friend of his took and he sketched it. And it's very big. And I think I told you brothers about it when I have my son. So I do something unique for my sons when they turn 14 or 16. It was 16 because of COVID. I have a birthday party. But at this birthday party, I have several Black men come and speak into their life, give them advice. And then at the end, I speak. And at the end, I hold the picture up because that's the only memory. That's the only memory I have of him. So I think the greatest impact is really to be a father to my sons. And I don't even know why I get so emotional when I talk about him, but I mean his name. That's the greatest impact. And I think a name is worth more than rubies, and gold, and silver, as the Bible says. So that's his name is one that I try to keep out the streets, keep out of jail, not a whole bunch of women, kids, all of those things. So the greatest impact was trying to keep his name alive. Yeah.
Lindsberg, I think what you just said is powerful, but you just said, you don't know why you get emotional, but and Tim can attest to this because he's in the mental health field working on his doctorate. But one of the things they teach about grief is that at every stage of your life you grieve the loss of something. And so, because there's so many unanswered questions, how you feel and how it triggers you, that's valid.
For sure.
That's definitely valid. I think the greatest impact for me for my dad's uh, somewhat physical absence because of his career and then also because of his ability to connect emotionally. I think that I stumbled into manhood and I stumbled through manhood. So I just was left to figure out so much. And then the truth of the matter is it made me bitter. Not so much when I was young, but In my 20s, I was a bitter man, saved, sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost, but bitter. Because I felt like I was just unprepared for life. Felt like, everybody else had these great stories about how their father reared them up in the things of God, and here I am, left to figure it out. So I think that was the greatest impact on my life.
We all have unique perspectives
Yeah, for sure.
of the absence. But let me ask this question. Gentlemen, how has your father's absence shaped your emotional journey? And in what ways has your faith helped you find peace? Step into your own leadership and become the man that others now look for purpose and strength. It's kind of a three-part question.
Since we got all these doctors on here, y'all should go first.
How has it shaped your emotional journey? And in what ways has your faith helped you find the peace to step into your leadership and become the man that others look to for strength and purpose?
I guess I'll try to kick it off. I know emotionally, connected to my previous answer, I grew up a hypersensitive child, hypersensitive, and the one thing that abandonment does is it makes you question your value and your worth. And it kind of, when I talked about that fear, what it does is it positions you in a way that you're concerned that something you do can make someone else leave. And so I had to really figure out ways to make myself valuable in whatever space I was in currently. And so I became what the space required, which meant I spent a lot of time not really knowing who I actually was. And so there was a lot of just kind of uncertainty in me. There was a lot of just low self-esteem, all that good stuff. And when my father passed, to take it to the faith aspect, that was a very pivotal moment for me because the immediate response was, well, God, why would you give him back to me just to take him a year later? I was fine. I was doing all right when he was away. But then I had to realize the opportunity to reconcile made handling his departure easier. It didn't feel like it right away, but the older I got, the wiser I was able to look back and say, man, if I didn't have that week, if I didn't have that opportunity to spend, like I was in the hospital the night that he died, I was there. And so we were reconnected, and that was very important. And so it was for me the moment where I decided I could either flee from God or really lean into him. And fortunately, I decided to lean into him. And I don't feel like my relationship with God was truly solidified until my father passed. Now, I was in church my entire life. By that point, I was the musician at the church. I was doing all the things. But as far as knowing him for myself and not just listening to what was being preached every week and taught every week and just coming to play music with my friends and my brothers, that really changed my trajectory spiritually. And thus it brought me to a place now where even though I'm still wounded in ways, I'm able to offer healing to others through my pain and through my experience and through my process. And so it all, as the Bible said, it all worked together. It all worked together. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm excited these days to be in spaces with men of all ages, because a lot of times we get to this place in our lives and we feel like we need to reach back to the younger fellas. But I'm finding that I need to reach out to my peers and at times even folks who are older than me who have not had an opportunity to process what I've been blessed enough to been able to process.
I, for me, like emotionally, I don't think I felt anything really until like middle school, high school age. Um, so for me, my father's absence was similar to Tim, not because of who I was, because he didn't know me and I didn't know him, but it was something that happened, something I did or didn't do, or something my mom did or didn't do. So for a while, I felt and I thought that if I was just a better person, if I could achieve well in school, some way, somehow, magically, he'll come back. After every high school graduation, college, my master's degree, I was still hopeful that this was enough for him to want to like me, to come back and be my dad. And then my relationship with God was the same way. If I was a good person, God will love me. But I later learned that God doesn't love me because of what I can do. God loves me because of who I am. And there's nothing I can do to earn God's love or forgiveness or, closeness, but it's who I am as a person. And that kind of shifted my relationship with God from doing to just being, right? And I think that helped me to understand that I am a good person, whether I have my dad or not. God loves me, whether I have degrees or not, or whether I travel or do things, just me as a person. And I don't have to achieve just for acceptance or love or affirmation. I can just exist as just Torren Cooper and that be enough. And for a while, that wasn't enough for me. So learning that and getting closer to God and knowing that God loves me for me helped me to understand who I am and how to navigate a little bit more as an adult. And I think now as a teacher, my students look to me as their teacher, but also as their dad, their uncle, their big brother, all these things that I didn't necessarily have. And I, like you, Tim, question God, like it's unfair that I have to be or that I'm called on to be, this mentor or this father figure to young kids. And I didn't have that same kind of thing. But I think that um, that's where I find my purpose, and those are where some of the holes are filled in my life by, still trying to figure it out myself, but helping young men navigate through their childhood and understand that they too, again, we want you to be the best you can be, but also I care about your heart, I care about your mind, your mental health, your emotional health. Those things are important to me, and I hear the comments from some teachers and people like, why do you hang out with this kid, or why you let them come in your classroom and do all these things? And I'm like, well, it's because I love them, and I think that society will tell Black men, that they're not important or you need to do certain things to have value. But to me, you just have value because of who you are. And I think that message that I show in my actions and through words as well too, is kind of shifting the culture in my school, but also in my neighborhood, in my church as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, I can attest to what you're saying. I think once I became a teacher because I didn't see anybody look like me as a teacher. But when I got into it, as you said, I think we just fell into place as a role model for those kids. And I was in education for 18 years, and at different levels, I wanted to be their ally, as their dean, as their coach, as their principal. And it happened naturally. So I think, like Tim said, it all worked for the good. I think that's probably was our purpose. One of our purposes was to definitely be there for certain kids because, it's a couple of kids who didn't get it at home, and we were able to encourage
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's me.
He's looking at me. I'm looking at you.
them.
Um, so just a little bit of my journey. I think it because of the absence of my physical father, it forced me to turn to God. I was always a church boy, but I became, a daddy's boy, if you will. Like I ran to God for everything, which is one of the reasons why my prayer life is the way it is. But on the flip side of that, I became a church junkie to anesthetize my pain. Um, I think it was Karl Marx said that religion can become the opiate of the masses. And for many years, I used the church to anesthetize my pain until I came to the conclusion that there were some things that you can't pray away. There's some things you can't praise away. There's some things you have to work through. And so, working through my emotional deficits, working through that was a journey. But what it has helped me to do is I've become um, surrogate father, mentor to other men. And so, and that's part of the reason why I have a passion for mental health, because I know what it is to be a man and be broken and not have the language to articulate what you feel. So because I've done the work, it's provided me a space and the reference, the frame of reference to be to other men what I needed when I was growing up.
Each and every one of what you guys have shared, especially Brother Wortham and Cooper, just not having my dad around, how it just created this, I would say, excessive need for validation. Um, and to, and when you couple that with my upbringing for church, faith was really a challenge for me, to be quite frank, because, for a long time, I was afraid of God.
Wow.
Um, I can recall one morning I was going through a coaching program, and so part of it was just making sure I spent time in quiet place and meditation. And the week I was teaching a class in the School of Ministry, and we were talking about the image of God, how we perceive God. And I just remember that morning, it was kind of like, so, in your heart of hearts, what do you think about God? And the first thing that came up was he's a murderer. It's afraid of him, right? Because growing up, I was taught every little thing I did, I was going to hell for it. I can be saved one minute, and in the same minute, I'm going to hell because of something I said or did or something like that. So, faith was a challenge for me. I knew how to go through the motions because I was raised in church, studied the word. So you kind of know what you're supposed to say and how you're supposed to respond. But just really, really getting into that authentic place of relationship with God. And like Brother Cooper was alluding to, just the love of God. And just to be, really transparent about it, I struggle with that still sometimes. That I could truly be loved for who I am, not for what I do or how I perform, that I can just be and God could love me, or, for anybody for that matter. So I would say it was how it kind of shaped my emotional posture. It was hard for me to trust men, um, because I never knew what a healthy relationship with a man looked like. Um, Most of my relationships was about with men were about performance, sports. You got to perform, you know, business. You got to perform. So, church. It was about performance. So, it took a while for me to work through those, and not to overly prolong the narrative here, but you know, just the things that my father left me to work through, from a spiritual standpoint. I didn't, I knew even as a young guy that there was a lot of things that I was left here to overcome that my dad left spiritually. Um, I don't know if I've ever shared the story about my name. My name is Trebor, my real name, which is the reverse of my dad's Robert's name. And so he didn't want two Roberts in the house. My brother's older brother, who's passed away, was Robert Anthony. My dad's name was Robert Clarence. So for him to have a junior, he just figured I'll just reverse the name and give me his middle name. And I realized that with him doing that, and it was him in a spiritual way reversing whatever curses that I had to overcome. So many of the battles I've had to face was because of what was pronounced over my family. And that's a struggle because here I am wrestling with spiritual things, but also having to struggle with faith at the same time, with the God who can help me through that. So it's been a definite journey, with being able to reconcile all those things and use faith. With that, I thank God that I did have God in that place because it did drive me to really question God and try to get to know him for myself. So it did drive that. So all things did work together for it. But that has been a major challenge for me, for that. But it's been good. It shaped me into the man I am today. It's drove me in places I probably would have never, I did therapy when it wasn't cool to do it. Now it's okay to do it now, for me. But I did therapy a while ago, when nobody's really talking about it. So um, I'll kind of try to cut it off there, with that. But I didn't realize that this conversation would kind of hit me so hard this morning. So I appreciate the convo, man, with that. But as we kind of start to wrap this up, I want to leave some space for Brother Wortham. I know he has a book called Daddy Issues. Can you try to talk to our listeners and audience about what that book is about, how it can impact those who are struggling with daddy issues, and even how they can partake and get the book?
Absolutely. So the book is available online at Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And really, it's just uh, kind of written on the premise that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So the book is my testimony from brokenness to healing, from, resentment to forgiveness. And I think that for those of us who have this common story, that really is uh, kind of the path and the journey that we're on, from the place of injury to the place of wholeness. And even though some of our pathways might be a little different, I feel like there are going to be enough moments throughout my story that resonate, even if it's not the exact same content. Maybe it's the exact same feeling, the exact same questioning, the exact same, just that moment that we all share. And just being very transparent about all the pitfalls and all the bad decisions and even the indecision that I've suffered over time, and how it's impacted me as a father myself now, how it impacted me as a husband. Because one of the things that we don't talk about is, when I don't see a father in the home, I also don't see a husband in the home. So not only am I not having a strong example of how to be a good father, I also don't have a great example of how to be a good husband. And when you become all these things for the first time, you're just really kind of learning on the job, so to speak. And so it is the most personal, most vulnerable work I've ever created, including any song I've ever written. This is really the most I've poured out my heart and put it on public display. And so the hope is that whoever reads it just takes something from it, even if it's one chapter that they can apply to their own story and their own situation.
Absolutely. And Brother Cooper, I mean, I know you're a youth advocate. You work with a lot of youth, young males. What would be maybe some final thoughts for not just young males, but just males in general, men in general, about this important issue we're talking about this morning?
Yeah, I would say that the first step is like acknowledging that you need like support, like you need help, emotional support, and that's not a bad thing. And I think that I would encourage young men, older men, whoever who has this issue, who has dealt with this issue, to get help through therapy, through group talk, group share, through writing and journaling, to get it all out, and that there is hope to find healing in your journey. And I think I will also push more Black men to be mentors and father figures and surrogate fathers, or so, to be teachers, just so that young Black men can see healthy, whole, godly Black men in safe spaces, so that they can, reach out to them and become connected. I think oftentimes as a kid, I just wondered, like, can anybody see me? Can anybody see us? And there were Black men at my church and, at school and in the community, but nobody seemed to really see what I was going through. And they may have, but I've learned that they may be struggling with the same thing as well, too, as an adult. So I think that if we and when we depend on one another to get through, we can change the culture of our environment. Every year there's a story of a kid who has the same issue of fatherlessness, and it doesn't end. And I think that we have to make it end. And I think also we have to hold our brothers accountable who we know have children. You know, some people in church who have kids who don't have strong relationships with their families, hold them accountable as well too, to say, hey brother, what's going on with this? How can I help? And I think those plugging those ways of like fatherlessness can help reduce the cycle. We can also help those who are still trying to find healing in their journey.
That's good.
Reverend, can I
Amazing.
can I say one more thing? Because
Absolutely.
I'd be remiss if we end this session and I don't share this, because Barry is probably the only person that knows that very recently I have really been on an intentional journey of embracing God as Father. And I didn't realize how my subconscious would not allow me to engage him that way. He was fine as God in all of his deity and all of his sovereignty, but the intimacy of the father-son relationship was lacking. And so for anyone who sees this episode, for anyone who's listening, anyone who's watching, I want you to know that God wants to be your father, but you first have to know that he's not your father.
Wow.
He wants to be your father, but first you have to know, because we charge him with what we're familiar with, he's not that. He's not that. So I just wanted to insert that before we wrap.
Man, timely. And before we even wrap it up, I just wanted to celebrate each and every one of you.
Yeah, man.
Because everyone on this call has had that challenge that they've had to battle through of not having that male influence, that father figure to help guide them, but yet you made it and you're making it. So I just want to celebrate each and every one of you. I know many times they say men don't get their flowers until we bury them. So I want to, give you guys your flowers, man, for just not just surviving, but you guys are thriving, and in such a way that you're also allowing God to use you to impact other people's lives. So what you've got, you haven't withheld it. You've given it freely. And so I just want to honor you guys this morning for the work that you're doing. Brother Tim, Brother Cooper, Barry, and Lindsberg, all you guys, just celebrate what you guys are doing. I just wanted to honor you with that. And so
Likewise.
as we close out, appreciate that. But I want to, I don't know if you mentioned, but Tim, how can people find you on social media? Same thing with you, Brother Cooper. How can they find your social media handles? How can they attend your church? Let everybody know who you are, how they can get to you.
Absolutely. Tim Wortham Jr. on all social media platforms, and I will do a much better job of sharing in those spaces how you can access our services on Sundays at 9.
And your music, sir.
Music available on the Gospel Beyond genre, available on all streaming platforms.
Yeah. You can find me online. I'm a small fish right now, but you can find me online at Torren Cooper. That's my name. On Facebook and Instagram. But on Instagram, you can also find me at Teach with TC. That's where I post all of my content, my educator stuff, pictures of me in the classroom, videos of me in the classroom. Also on LinkedIn as well too.
What about your blog, sir?
Oh, I do have a Substack. You can follow me on Substack. I write about everything, anything. You can find me on Substack as my name too, Torren Cooper.
Awesome. Well, this concludes another episode of The Lifeline with your host, BJE, Lindsberg Pettway, and Bo Powell. Don't forget to check us out at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline and on social media. Look, we're on a mission. We want to bring light and life into your household, so join us and let us hear your feedback, because it's all about bringing life to you on The Lifeline. Y'all take care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with host, business expert, and life coach Bo Powell, social media influencer and entrepreneur Lindsberg Pettway, and leadership coach and mental health advocate Barry J. Elliott. Join us next week for another impactful conversation on The Lifeline. God bless.